Today's episode is the first in the series on Switch, where we take a step outside the book to apply the concepts in the real world. I'm going to talk about ways to find the bright spots in a software engineering practice called test-driven development. If you've been following the series so far on Switch by Chip and Dan Heath, you've learned some steps in what they call directing the rider. Specifically, we've learned how to find bright spots. As I promised in the first episode of this series, I would talk about how I apply these concepts in my own work in bringing modern software engineering techniques to my own organization. One of the practices that I'm trying to grow in my own organization is the practice of test-driven development. Here is Kent Beck describing how he came up with the concept of test-driven development, or as it's abbreviated, TDD.
And I'd write one little test, I'd make it work. I wrote the next test. I'd only program just enough to make the next test work, and the next one, and the next one. And I thought, I can't think of any more tests that could possibly fail. And it was like cheating. That moment, that heroic moment as a programmer when things are about to get out of control, and then through the sheer force of your intellect and your will, you pull order out of chaos, that moment was gone. Instead, I just said, now the program needs to do this, okay, it does it, and it needs to do that, and it does it, and it needs to do that, and it does it, and it needs to do that, and by implication, I can't think of any other inputs that would cause this program to break. Oh, okay. So that's how TDD, test-driven development, this odd style came about for me.
Now that we know what test-driven development is, how do we get an organization to adopt it? What we've learned so far is to look for bright spots. Assuming that your organization's leaders are in favor of having the teams acquire this skill, and attempts have been made to give teams opportunities to try it, then we can begin gathering data on what teams are already successfully practicing TDD. Questions to ask may be, are there teams that can claim that, thanks to TDD, they are delivering features at a more regular velocity than other teams, or with fewer bugs? Next, we make sure that we understand the normal way things are done. Do people on all teams at least write unit tests? And if so, are they true unit tests that isolate the unit under test from its dependencies, or are they more like integration tests? If they are failing to do this much, you may need to go and take a step back and try this same technique to bring your organization up to par on basic unit test skills. Then we want to make sure that none of those teams are exceptional in a way that disqualifies them as a bright spot. For example, if the bright spots are writing code for a different domain than the other team, say web applications versus embedded systems, that may be something to take into consideration as a potential disqualifier. Next, study what the bright spot teams are doing. How are they addressing challenges like lack of knowledge of good dependency isolation practices or refactoring practices? Are there differences between how bright spot teams are structured and how the rest of the organization is structured? Are bright spot teams rewarded in a different way? Do they practice other extreme programming skills that make TDD easier, such as pair programming? Finally, find a way to reproduce the practices of the bright spots in the other teams. The bright spots, not you, should be the ones to teach the others. Some options for knowledge sharing could be having a bright spot team member lead seminars or participate in cross-team projects where skills can be transferred. Or you could create a community of practice for sharing these skills among representatives that can then share with their teams. The main thing is that you'd be avoiding the not invented here problem. As we learn more techniques from the book, we will return to applications like this one. In the next episode, we'll examine a second technique for directing the rider called scripting the critical moves.